All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the North County Estate Planning Council's August meeting. My name is Ollie Ben from the Jewish Community Foundation. We've been happy to host these webinars for Bill and the North County Estate Planning Council over the last year, and we'll continue to do so as long as we are not in person. About the Jewish Community Foundation very quickly, we believe that every individual can make a difference, and together we can change the world. There are many familiar names on the call today, but for those who don't know us, we have historically been one of the largest grant makers in San Diego and currently have about $700 million in assets under management on behalf of individuals, families, and organizations. JCF facilitates their philanthropy, matches their special interests, and provides personalized granting services. We stay abreast of current issues locally and beyond, and are very proud of a reputation of trust that we have built in the community. We've committed significant resources to our partnership with you, our esteemed professional advisor community, and are the go-to organization when our partners have questions or needs for their clients, particularly when it involves the use of non-cash assets to advance charitable giving in tax-effective ways. We are creative and inclusive, so please reach out and get to know us. We have a number of resources and programs, including the Trusted Charitable Advisor Program, which is a fantastic network of organizations in San Diego who have all learned how to include philanthropy in their practice with their clients. Additionally, we have a wonderful curated reading list that is getting increasingly popular that we send out about every couple of weeks that tells the story of what's going on in the nonprofit world, the world of philanthropy, and issues affecting people in San Diego. If you'd like to read over our shoulders and receive a regular email with our curated selection of the most interesting things we've run across, just put your name in the chat or send me an email and we'll happily add you to the list. This is free and open to everybody. I will be back in a few minutes actually, but for now I will turn it over to Bill.
Good morning, everyone. Thrilled to have you here for the August meeting of the North County Estate Planning Council, San Diego. We're really pleased to have a great panel today. Doug Wilson, CEO of Douglas Wilson Companies, Don Hall Caneen of Caneen and Booth Law Firm, and Emily Bouchard of Cent Private Capital Management of U.S. Bank. They're going to present on how estate planners and real estate professionals can work together to achieve the most optimal outcomes for their clients. We'll have more about this in a bit, and more formal introductions by each of them. Leading this panel is our moderator, Michelle Vives of Douglas Wilson Companies. So thrilled to have them and presenting on lessons from the trenches, the who, what, why, and when of legacy real estate. Before we get to that, we just want to go through some announcements. Our September meeting is around the corner. We've got that's September 7th. Always the first Tuesday of the month, so put that on your calendar as a recurring appointment. John Kramer of Kramer Land Company and a very experienced advanced life insurance professional. He's going to be presenting about the single family office, the challenges of working with the family and a family business over multiple generations. A fantastic story as far as how that's arrived. I mean, I think it's currently about 140 people in the family as far as that the family office takes care of. But I think their involvement in the real estate world goes back hundreds of years. So it's a fascinating story that we'll cover. Of course, we always meet the first Tuesday of the month. October 5th, 2021, we've got Ron Ocut of the Bessemer Trust. He is the ultimate DC Watcher, ACTEC fellow, and he's going to be talking about where he thinks things are going to go, what's really going to happen. Fascinating fellow. We're fine-tuning the November and December meetings, but a lot to be looking forward to for sure. Just an alert, the San Diego chapter of the Advisors in Philanthropy organization is up and running. Certainly in the information that you've received, you've got the contact information for Claudia Ehrlich, president of AIP San Diego, and Marty Dutch, president of AIP National. Certainly contact them, that would be in the emails that you have, or certainly reach out to me and I can connect you with them. The AIP website is www.advisorsinphilanthropy.org. We are looking forward to getting back to meeting in person. We're somewhat pointed to October, but who knows? This was following some of the other organizations that I'm involved with. That's where they were pointed, but with this Delta variant or what have you, I think we certainly have a bit of an unknown there. In the meantime, as we just continue on with today's presentation, certainly do participate in our trifectas that are led by Pete Tentler. Great way to develop deeper relationships in smaller groups of professionals in a more intimate setting, maybe in person. I think some are taking place in person now, or you can still do it through Zoom or Microsoft Teams. Do go to our website at www.ncepc-sd.org. David Jacobs has really been doing a bang-up job as far as improving that website, dealing with the council and on LinkedIn, and a lot going on with that. I certainly always want to thank our Hot Topic ladies who presented in June, but they're always on the lookout for things that are happening federally or at the state of California level. This is Katie Swafford of Withersbergman, Roberta Robinson of Robinson and Wilson, and Kristen Shepard of Goodwin Brown. We thank them for always keeping a lookout for items of interest to all of us. I want to switch gears and introduce you to our sponsors today, Mike Novak and Tana Cleaves of Pro Fiduciary Inc. They're two private fiduciaries from Pro Fiduciary, which is sponsoring today's meeting. Tom Thale, who many of you all know, founded Pro Fiduciary in 2005 after a long career working in a bank trust department. Over time, Tom brought in a number of other trust professionals to work with him in building Pro Fiduciary into one of the San Diego County's largest groups of private fiduciaries that practice together. Tana and Mike, take it from here.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us and giving us a moment to introduce you to Pro Fiduciary and update you on what's new at the company. I'm Tana Cleaves, and I left the bank trust department world and joined Pro Fiduciary in 2013 to work with Tom. And Tom's goal was to provide better service for his clients. And of course, in the process, he brought on other trust professionals like myself. And with our combined experience, we administer many types of trusts, including revocable, irrevocable, special needs, charitable, and life insurance. And we also settle many different kinds of estates as well. We also have experience with different types of assets, including residential and investment properties, closely held companies, as well as royalties, timeshares, and obscure personal property, which can be difficult. Notably, Pro Fiduciary carries errors and omission insurance that covers all our fiduciary acts. And a few of our fiduciaries on our team will also take on appointments where litigation is either underway or it's on the horizon. While most of you know, unfortunately, we lost Tom in 2018, and we sincerely miss him. Our company has grown and has come through strong, and we are excited to carry on his vision and to continue growing our team. So Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning. Thank you, Tana. Myself and Daniel Campbell, who couldn't join us today, are the newest licensed fiduciaries here at Pro Fiduciary. I never met Tom, but from what has been shared with me, his vision was for Pro Fiduciary to be a home for private fiduciaries to work together, but share resources like administrative staff and office space. Prior to his passing, Tom purchased our current home at 1842 3rd Avenue in Bankers Hill. And although he was able to design the build out of the space, he did not live long enough to see his wife and son finish the project, which was completed in 2019. Pro Fiduciary has 6 private fiduciaries and 4 administrative operations staff, 2 of whom recently joined us from Susan Fox's office. Additionally, we have 1 retired employee and 1 outside accountant to help us prepare accountings. Also, we want to mention that Pro Fiduciary has a total of $184 million in assets under management, about 30% of which are real estate assets such as homes and investment properties. About 35% of our accounts are court appointed and the remainder are self-sourced. Our account minimum is $1 million and our largest account is a little over $25 million. Thank you for allowing us to sponsor today's class and update you on Pro Fiduciary, its growing team, and plans for the future. We look forward to working with all of our fellow fiduciary industry partners and referring business to one another. Thank you, Bill.
You bet. Thank you so much, Mike and Tana and Pro Fiduciary Inc. We really appreciate your sponsorship. We're going to take care of introductions as we move into the presentation portion, with each of the speakers and our moderator taking it on from there. Michelle Vivas, I'm going to pass this on to you. She's Vice President at Douglas Wilson Companies, and off we go.
Thank you for that introduction, Bill, and for having me moderate today's presentation. It really has been a wonderful time working with you and the panelists as we prepared for this discussion. For all of you tuned in whom I can't see, thank you for joining us this morning. I hope you are all doing well and weathering the up and coming storms that we're having. Today, I'm joined by 3 panelists who have an incredibly diverse experience in legacy assets as well as estate planning. Combined, they have worked through really complex projects and matters, and they're here to discuss them with you. As mentioned, our panelists are Don Cunneen from Cunneen Booth, Douglas Wilson of Douglas Wilson Companies, and Emily Bouchard of Ascent Private Capital Management at US Bank. They will each be giving you a brief introduction of themselves and the type of work they do. After, I'll get the show on the road with a few house rules while setting the stage for what you'll be hearing from our panelists. Lessons from the trenches, the who, what, why, and when of legacy real estate. Dawn, I'll hand it over to you for your first introduction.
Good morning, everyone. It's bright and early and a beautiful day. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Dawn Cunneen, and I am an attorney. I practice in the area of trust and estates. And my partner and I, about 3 years ago, left an international law firm and formed our own firm. And our firm is exclusively devoted to all matters trust and estates. So we work on estate planning to help individuals develop the structure for transferring their family wealth. We work on trust and estate administration, trust and estate litigation, and then we have a family office practice that is perhaps one of the most fun parts of our practice. And we're going to be talking about that more today. So looking forward to this panel discussion.
Thank you, Dawn, and thank you for joining the panel. Now I'll hand it over for introductions of Doug Wilson.
As many of these have done, you think I'd remember to turn the sound on. But anyway, let's rewind that. Good morning, everybody. Doug Wilson, Douglas Wilson Companies. Great to be here. And Bill, thank you again for your continuous leadership on this this whole process. It's been a wonderful programs over the past many years. So As a kind of background, and we really are excited about this conversation because we're really going to be talking about some real life contexts and real stories that I think will allow everybody to understand the importance of some of the services we provide. But very briefly, Douglas Wilson Companies is nearly a 40-year-old business in San Diego, going back to my development days when I developed Symphony Towers here in the late and mid 80s. I evolved from that and started what is now Douglas Wilson Companies in 1989 to really develop a platform that was able to navigate the various economic cycles that often impact real estate. I had observed that many of my peers and as developers were really naive about that and thought the sun always shined. And so I literally in 89 started a business that was supporting financial institutions in time of distress, in down cycles economically, to act as a receiver, a trustee, a special master, and other matters as a fiduciary in the real estate context, and was able to grow that into an institutional platform that over these ensuing 31 years has evolved into a national platform handling every form of real estate asset. We've had nearly 1,200 assignments in about 30 states, involving about $15 billion of assets. And so as you can see, a large part of our business isn't just development. The larger part of our business is to provide real estate advisory services. We have been focusing on the legacy aspect of our platform for about the last 5 years, because it really allows us to have an intersection of our in-depth knowledge of all aspects of real estate in dealing with families and complexities in the issues involved in the transition of these real estate assets. So we're glad to be here today. We're glad to share some of our stories and look forward to being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. I appreciate that introduction. Now I'll hand it over to Emily Bouchard. Emily?
Thanks, Michelle. So I am a leadership and legacy consultant at Ascent Private Wealth Capital Management at US Bank, and it's a multifamily office that serves family offices and large families that have complex estate planning needs. And we have, I'm part of a national team, and I focus on the family dynamics, family communication, governance. We're going to be talking about some more personal issues that can happen when the family is emotionally not as ready for the transitions as the tactical nature might be, in terms of like, we're going to transition this to save taxes, but what does it mean to be an owner of this? So things around decision making and who's going to be in charge of what roles and responsibilities. So I actually have a social work degree, and it's a remarkable thing to be in this role and at a national bank with a really phenomenal team. We have a PhD historian, we have philanthropic advising. We have an open position for that. We're having a new person leading the philanthropic advising component of what we do, which is exciting. And we have an office here in UTC. Kerwin Deese is your contact there. I think he might even be on this. And we serve families 75 million or more in investable assets. And they oftentimes will have companies, massive, like real estate holdings, along with multiple homes and like multi-generational needs. So very complex. And my specialty is blended families. So when you have the step family situation that's happening. So I'm looking forward to this conversation and talking about how to make it so values can be connected to these valuables that we always talk about.
Great, thank you, Emily. And thank you again to all of our panelists. Before we get started, a few items to note for the audience. We want this to be an interactive dialogue between you and the panelists. While we have some time for Q&A at the end of the discussion, please feel free to submit your questions via the chat room. I'll be monitoring your questions and we'll try to incorporate them throughout the presentation or later in our Q&A. Our goal today is to share with you how these three areas of legacy real estate planning work together to resolve and plan for the transition and/or management of real estate among family members. We hope you find this educational and informative as we share with you some real-world examples and how this process can help facilitate collaborative planning. I'm going to hand it over to Dawn. I'm going to wait her to get, there you go, Dawn. Thank you very much, and I'll enjoy the presentation.
Thank you, Michelle. That was a very helpful introduction. So we're going to cover 3 areas today of serving families with high concentrations of real estate and business succession issues. So this morning, I'm going to talk to you about the overall structure within which you can work with the family office clients. So mine is portion of this program is more the big picture of what is the framework for working with the families. Then Doug is going to dive into some really excellent case studies, and that are just interesting stories. If you like stories, you're going to like Doug's portion of the presentation, and he always does such a great job, and there's a lot of lessons baked into each story and each case study. And then Emily will talk about what I consider, quite frankly, the most difficult aspect of what we do, and that's the family dynamics and the values and the tools that Emily is going to share with you apply not only to families with high concentrations of real estate, but really across the board for the estate planner, the financial advisor, the CPA, working with families as they're trying to transition their wealth from one generation to another. So it's going to be a very well-rounded presentation, and it's going to hopefully provide you some very practical tools for how to work with your clients. So when we talk about the family office, the biggest question I always get is, what is a family office? Because it's not a common term, and it's not a commonplace term, but it's a commonplace activity. So when we have families that we work with in the family office structure, I have never had one family come in to me and say, Dawn, I'm here to see you to develop a family office. That has never happened. What happens is, most typically, a CPA or a financial advisor is working with a client, and they have assets that have evolved over time. They have acquired multiple businesses, but there's not really a structure. The businesses don't relate to one another in any way because no one really planned how these entities were going to work together and what was the maximum way to manage the entities. For example, should the operating company be in one entity, all the real estate that they use but be in another entity? Should there be leasebacks? What's the best way to bring all the family businesses together under one umbrella? And they haven't also talked about, is there going to be centralized management? Is there going to be a strategy for transferring the family wealth? Are some family members involved in the business, or are they not? How will they share economically if they're not involved in the business, or will they even have an economic benefit if they're not involved in the business? Are insurance needs being coordinated? Is there any tax or estate planning being taken into account as the business structure is developed and operated? So typically what happens is a client is referred to us, and we see real estate held in a variety of entities, or directly held, real estate held in trust, and no one even has a copy of the trust. They don't remember who drafted it because it was so long ago, and they talked with the attorney only once. And so we will typically spend probably 3 to 6 months with the average client. And these are folks who have north of $40–50 million in assets, just getting a solid asset list. And one thing we've learned is never take your client's word for how assets are held. Always do your own due diligence. We never create asset lists until we have personally verified the assets. We pull title. We work with title companies across the United States to make sure we have the correct title to all real estate. And it's a hard and fast rule in our firm. Nothing goes on the Holy Grail asset spreadsheet until we have personally verified title and we have documentation to support that. And that is, quite frankly, 9/10 of the battle with families who have evolved over time without this structure. So there are two structures for family offices. One is where it's fully staffed with in-house advisors. It's the company that runs the company. And that's typically with family office clients who are north of $100 million in assets managed through the family office. The second form of family office is the outsourced family office. And that will be a family office where perhaps they have a major project, like a development project, and they don't want to fully staff up forever, because once the development is complete, they wouldn't need all of that staff. Or for family offices with less than 100,000 in assets. So when we work with individuals, we work predominantly in our practice with the outsourced family office. I love it. I think it's so much fun. That practice is really focused on team building. And after we identify the assets, we build the team and we draw in people with the resources. And for example, we've worked with Doug and Michelle on several projects. We have a client who had a restaurant burn down, and the publicly traded company that owned that restaurant refused to rebuild it for about a year. And we brought in the Doug Wilson group, and we brought them in for two reasons. One, the CEO the general counsel for this publicly traded company was an obstructionist. And I, as an attorney, cannot bypass general counsel and talk directly to the VP of construction. But guess what? Michelle Beavis can. And so we brought in Michelle, who is excellent at team building, gaining consensus, and can communicate with the most difficult people. And she was able to talk to the VP of construction. I didn't have to go through the general counsel anymore, who just looked for reasons to say no. And she was able to get the building rebuilt. And we just did our final walkthrough, and it was done very well, and it was a successful project. But so there are different reasons you bring in folks. If there's communication problems, you can work around those by how you structure the team. And then also we needed Michelle's expertise to get the building redone. Another project we brought Doug Wilson in on was we had some coastal land that's been vacant since the beginning of time, and they wanted to work on developing that. So we build the team around the nature of the projects. The CPA will be always, in my view, they're the power seat, because guess what? They have all the data. They're the ones the clients see every year. They're the ones who have the specifics. So in my view, the CPA is just critical. And if we are not best friends with our client's CPA by the end of our first year of working together, then we failed in our job. And the financial advisor is also a key person on this team. And then of course, someone in Emily's role, if you have enlightened clients that will permit you to bring in someone like Emily, it will save hours, if not years, of banging your head against the wall trying to get through issues. Because I have learned that for us, the technical issues are easy. If we have a real estate issue, you can call Doug Wilson Group, and there's really nothing that I've encountered that they can't solve. If you have a tax issue, we have fantastic CPAs that we work with. We have terrifically talented financial advisors that we work with. And you can control the technical aspects of these projects, but you have zero control over the family dynamic aspects and the technical aspects. They all have boundaries. We all know where we're supposed to, we all know our lane, and we know what we're supposed to do, and we know how to get from A to B. Well, when you're talking about the family dynamics issues, they spin in circles, and my mind doesn't work in circles. My mind works in a linear line. And so someone like Emily is absolutely critical, because I just get frustrated. Like, my goodness, these people, they just talk to each other, and it's not quite that simple. And Emily can actually get them talking to one another. So that is the structure that we talk about when we say family office. It's bringing order to chaos and bringing reason and purpose to everything that the client owns, and making sure all the businesses line up. They each have a purpose, not only in and of themselves, but as they relate to one another. And then once you have that structure, then you can start talking about business succession planning. And when I talk with client or other attorneys who call me to just bounce ideas off of me, often I see where the failure in the process comes when they're really super frustrated is they've started talking first about business succession planning, and they skip the whole first layer of building the structure and making sure every entity relates to each other, because then there's an orderly base from which to do the business succession planning. So I think with that thought in mind, I'd like to give it back to Michelle and go on to Doug, and Doug can talk about on a practical level how this all kind of plays out.
Thanks so much, Dawn. And really, thank you for being able to lay that out for our audience so that they understand the structures and really what goes into this process. I think you did a great job for us in really defining the various roles. As you mentioned, I am going to hand it over to Doug Wilson. Doug will really be able to give us some real world examples as well on how he's really been using this platform and this process for decades. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you, Michelle. And Dawn, you touched on so many very important aspects of all of these assignments, and what really allowed us to gravitate to this industry is really, it was fundamental premise was that, you know, a lot of these families have a lot of liquid assets, and our observation was a lot of banks, trust departments, and other entities can easily handle liquid assets. However, real estate is its own unique species, has a lot of challenges and issues. And what we've observed is many times, not always, but many times there's a strong-willed patriarch. And so as these assets are being handed down to subsequent generations, and we're in the middle of a massive transfer of wealth over these next several decades, there are a lot of challenges that arise. And so that was really the foundation of allowing us to get involved in this business model. But we also recognized that any success was going to be built upon working collaboratively with the team. Now that team consists of Dawn, consists of Emily, consists of financial advisors, CPAs, and others, because we are merely a part of the team. These complex situations dealing with the unique aspects of families and all of the challenges truly is a collaborative effort. And so that's how we approach every assignment. But today I want to touch upon a couple of examples that I think you may find of interest. One is actually goes back a number of years, but has so many features and factors that I think are very, very pertinent in today's discussion. There's a large project in San Francisco called China Basin. This project was owned by a family that is well known, that shall remain unnamed, that had a lot of landmark assets. But this particular asset was the last remaining asset. It was a 650,000 square foot warehouse built on the wharf in San Francisco that had been adaptively reused into an office building in the early 90s. That building, however, had really remained dormant, and it was a bit of a jewel in the rough that the family had not paid attention to. We therefore were approached by both the law firm as well as the accounting firm that represented the trustee. And we met with the trustee and the family and all of their advisors. And what we did is say, why don't we be engaged to come in to holistically, objectively evaluate what it is they have, to look at all of the various underlying issues and challenges with that building. And how could that building best be repositioned and monetized? The goal of the family was quite simply to liquidate that asset because they did not want to hold real estate long-term. They wanted to liquidate it into investments. Therefore, when we got involved, that was a dynamically changing market. The ballpark was just starting to be constructed next door, which is now AT&T Field. Also, there was this phenomenon called South America market in the tech evolution that was really growing with a lot of momentum in the late 90s and the early 2000s. So when we looked at this building, however, it had a litany of challenges. There were structural challenges, seismic challenges, operational challenges, entitlement challenges, and just the marketability challenges. And so we started with the basics and we said, okay, let's put all of this information together, analyze that information, do a market study to determine what would be its highest best use. Well, we determined that the highest and best use was to have it be adaptively reused into office, but to really take it into the next decades. And so we literally put together a business plan that involved considerable CapEx expenditure rather, about $15 million. But we felt that on the basis of its current value, of the existing value at that time of 35 million, could put it in a position of being significantly more valuable. And so we literally assembled a team that allowed us to do that. And we then decided, why don't we test the market? At that point, we literally put together an offering memorandum and oversaw that process with a local brokerage firm, well-suited in that marketplace. And we told a story of what that could be into the future, into the evolving marketplace. And although at that point, we had about 50 million invested into the building, we were shocked when the market, although everyone thought maybe we get 60 or $65 million, the market after an orderly 6-month process came back and said it was worth $85 million. Now, as I'm Irish and as I get older, I learned how to warmly embrace luck and timing because we really were the beneficiaries of both. This was one of the first purchases by Blackstone, who's now one of the largest holders of real estate. And so we were able then to sell that asset successfully after it had been repositioned, and then to take those liquid assets and hand them over to the trustee who could invest it in liquid assets. There was a tremendous upside, and it really was the foundation of our business model going forward and working with families. And that was to step one, to objectively look at what that asset is today, what the issues, what the obstacles, what the challenges, so that we can then go to the next step, which is to work with the family in a collaborative basis with all of the other professionals involved. That would be Dawn and Emily and the others we talked about, to be able to craft a business plan for all of these assets moving forward. And once that is in place, and this is all incremental processes and incremental steps, we then could move forward and actually implement that business plan. And so China Basin really pre-existed our formal involvement with our legacy asset platform, but it had always been a part of our fee-based advisory services. And so approximately 5 years ago, when we were looking at how could we evolve Douglas Wilson Companies through these many years to be well-positioned to the future, it seemed like a natural transition to focus more on families specifically, because the story of China Basin was right in the heart of what that effort would be. So we then actually went out and began to market those services. We've had absolutely tremendous luck. And I wanted to share with you another story, because this family is, although they as well will remain unnamed, this was a very fascinating story, because this was a 4-generation family where there had been a very strong-willed patriarch that had amassed a variety of assets. These assets spanned from retail to residential to land leases to hotel and hospitality, entertainment venues up in the Los Angeles area. And so it was really, it was a remarkable potpourri of all these different assets that they had, that the family really had no idea what that they had at that point. And so the goal of the family was to, why don't we come in and engage us who could come in and look through at our advisory services platform at each of these specific assets. Understand again what the current opportunities might be in today's market conditions. Understand, because much of these assets were land in North County, what were the current zoning challenges? What were the current entitlement challenges? What were the current lease structures? What were the current capital structures? And so we were then able to come up with not one size fits all, but come up with different solutions for different asset classes. One group in particular is in North County. It consists of a lot of wonderful pieces of property, most of which are long-term land leases. After our objective evaluation, having determined that really the highest and best use is what they already had in place, because the challenge is to try to reposition these assets, redevelop these assets because of the entitlement challenges on coastal property in California. It was really burdensome, and we didn't think that that was going to be successful. And so we literally then advised the family that what they should do with respect to these assets is to enhance the current lease structure, manage the process better, improve it, and make sure that you're paying attention as each of these leases roll over so that you're able to improve the terms of the leases long-term for the benefit of the family. Different asset, different challenge. We had a very unique property that was in Los Angeles. This is quite a story because this theater, which is well known to everyone, is the Roxy. The Roxy was built in the late 60s, early 70s on Sunset Boulevard. It was literally an iconic venue, still is today. Everyone from Neil Young and many others played there through the years. But this asset was held in the family. And this was held in a tick structure. The family that was our client owned about 50% of this asset with another family. And so we were dealing with the challenges of not just the tick structure, but how do we, pardon me, I'm going to find this one, but how do we analyze what it is that it is today and what are the limitations? Now, we found quickly that the lease was clearly under market, but there were other challenges at the site. There were two parcels. One was in the city of Los Angeles, one was in West Hollywood. That really limited the opportunity to redevelop these sites and consolidate the parcels. We also found that the tenant on their own had gone ahead and built a couple of billboards on the site that resulted in about $500,000 of annual income. Now, the family was not the recipient of any of that income, and the lease had been structured rather poorly, and so that they were merely, getting a base rent every month, but where they were not in a position to be able to participate in all of the financial benefits of the real estate. And so after we went through the next step, understanding the limitations and challenges of the site and understanding what, again, their goal was for this site, and that was to probably sell it and to take those dollars in a variety of 1031 exchanges and to improve their net income. And so we did that. We went out and again, oversaw an orderly marketing process. That marketing process had to be very responsible and understand what many of the challenges were going to be for that property. And that we really had a limited hemisphere of buyers. What we did have going for us, though, is it was a remarkably iconic piece of property. And so we then were able to take that to market. And this was about 18 months ago, a little more than that, about 20 months ago. We were taking it to market, and there was so much capital in the market, which we knew that we were able to then enter into a contract with, in fact, the current tenant. The tenant was the one that saw the greatest value in this property because they wanted to keep it as is, as the iconic Roxy Theater in the Rainbow Room Bar and Grill next door. And so we went through an orderly process and took it to the market, and we're able to sell this for significant dollars, substantially more than they ever would have thought. But the end result, the net result, is that we were able to, in fact, reinvest those dollars through a number of 1031 exchanges, having dealt with the issues in the TIC structure and in each of the families, and they all had different challenges, benefits, and what their desires were. And they were able to, in fact, increase their income threefold. I'd like to say it was putting a man on the moon, but it wasn't. It was merely understanding better what those assets were, what they could be in today's world, and how best to take advantage of today's market conditions, reposition those assets, and achieve the goal that the family wanted, was to enhance net value. Now, I must say, all of these processes were done collaboratively with all of the professionals that I'm sharing today's program with. We had a litany of meetings. Those meetings were with several generations of the family at once. At one time, we had about 12 or 14 people in our conference room. And I think in our world, and in the world that Emily and Dawn live in, it's really about being able to be artful in how you deal with these families, to understand the challenges of dealing with these families, and understand that it has to be a slow evolutionary process, and you have to feed them information kind of incrementally. We've learned this having been a receiver or a trustee on literally billions of assets. We've dealt with a lot of challenging personalities throughout these many decades. And so we've learned how to kind of navigate those waters. And so we think that, I'm often asked, what families need this kind of work? Most families need this kind of work, because most families really, when they admit it, they don't really understand what it is that dad had come up with and what these assets could be going forward. And so I think we want to have an interactive discussion. We want to talk in, much more detail in a Q&A period about some of the other challenges and the opportunities, some of the stories we have. And so again, thank you for having me today, and look forward to the rest of the program.
Thanks so much, Doug. And I'm definitely going to be prompting you all with questions about the challenges, the obstacles, how you overcome them, because this is a very complex process. Before I do so and we get to Q&A, it's going to be important that we hear from Emily, who really deals with the emotional and psychological side of families and how they build trust and consensus together. So Emily, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, thanks. And I'll keep this slide up for a second because I wanted to share something, because in our preparation of doing this, we had a great conversation about this. And one of the things that we talked about was people are often surprised when I say we have a PhD historian that's on our Ascent Family Office Services team. And this is a perfect reason why. And it was really fun to talk about the intangible aspect of an asset like this. And this family owned the Roxy for quite a number of years. It was historical within their own family legacy. And deciding to sell it was not necessarily as simple for some of the family members as others. And when we were talking, Doug even said that they brought pictures in and they had stories about it, and they were really excited about owning this property. And one of the things that you can do when you're working with a family that has an iconic piece of property or something that really means something to them, even if it's not known publicly, is allow the history to remain alive for them, and so that they have a sense of keeping that piece of their legacy intact, even as they sell it. So they can do things like gathering up those pictures and creating some sort of digital timeline storyline. We have an online service that we offer to families where they can have a place where any family member anywhere in the world can see it privately. And then they can also decide if they want some of it to be seen publicly, which is also a wonderful thing, to have their joy of something and the story is kept alive. And they can choose to what degree they want it known. And then future generations that aren't going to be born into a family that owns this can know that they did own it, and all the different stories as well. And it's a wonderful thing to really talk about, what were the values that had us own this in the first place? Why did we love it so much? Why do we keep it? And then how can we continue to express those values in other ventures and other ways of expressing ourselves in the world, maybe even philanthropically, while we're making more money by parlaying this amazing asset into something that gives us 3 times, right, the amount that we were getting. So, there's ways to keep that memory alive. And I just wanted to emphasize that before I go on to my story, because I think it's important to realize there's so many things you can do to support that conversation going well and to keep that commitment to whatever that past was alive for the family. Thanks. I'm going to talk a little bit about a strong matriarch. I think that it's important to say that while there's strong patriarchs, there's also strong matriarchs we work with. And it's great to know that we have different personality types, we have different temperaments. It's really good to be aware of like, what are the values behind what has somebody feel so strongly about something. So this is a story about a family that I ended up meeting through one of the third generation cousins that was the recipient of this amazing gift of a family held ranch that had been in the family for generations. But it's one of those things where one is a gift, not exactly a gift. When is there a lot of burden connected to it? So just a little bit of history about the land and the property. The family owned this expansive ranch, gorgeous area, Half Moon Bay is extraordinary. And the powerful matriarch had all these memories of what it was like when she was a little girl, what it was like to hear stories about this property, what her grandmother told her, and so this property meant a lot to her. And over the years, it was built out. So this is like an old picture from 1939. But then it got built out with much nicer buildings and outbuildings, and the family really used it for all kinds of different things. And some family members more than others, right? Some are much more outdoorsy, closer by. They really enjoyed the hunting, the fishing, the horseback riding. And then there's some family members that maybe live further away and they might come for a family reunion, but didn't really make a lot of use of the property. So what happened was through the tax planning and the decision-making related to the property, you can go on the next slide, it was decided that it was going to be gifted to these 9 cousins from 3 different branches, right? So there were 3 siblings that the matriarch, those were her children. And those 3 children had, over the course of time, they had 9 children, right? So we had 9 cousins that were suddenly in this position of owning this property. And, they have memories of going to the ranch and enjoying it on different levels. And they formed, all this, the tax planning was done, it was transferred. They had a legal partnership that was around it, but they didn't have any governance in place. They had no idea how to make any decisions together. And they had a lot of challenges because some people loved this ranch, wanted it to stay exactly how it was. And especially when the matriarch passed away, and there was a sense of, no, she always wanted it to be like this. There was a sense of some of the cousins not wanting to make any improvements. And then other cousins definitely wanted to make improvements, but then it was a question of, we own it all equally. Do we have to put in the same amount when some of us are making massive use of it and having a great time at it, and others of us aren't benefiting from it at all? And the distinction with this one is, at the time that this was happening, it was not an income producing property. It was something to be enjoyed, but it was an expensive property. They had some part of the land that might have been leased for cattle or for some growers, but it was not a big money-making concern at all. But there were some business things that needed to be taken care of. So with all these different questions and everything, when they found out about like the work that I do, it was like, oh my gosh, can you help us? Because we're in this like intractable place and it's miserable and it's really impacting our relationships. So we start with, anytime we come into a situation like this, we really want to allow everybody to have a say and to really listen. And it's developing the skills of listening. So we do different foundational components where we help people understand their temperaments, their learning styles, their communication styles. And then we help them understand and identify their values, their individual values, and then what are the core family values. And then they define what those core family values are. So let's say everyone says family is a core value. They all might have definitions of what family means. For some people, it might just be bloodline. For other people, it might be anybody who comes to this ranch is considered family, including the people who work on the ranch, because there are, they are our family of affinity, right? So you have to give a chance for everybody to describe and define for themselves what their core value means when there's a shared one, and then they need to come up with a shared definition together. that sometimes can take a little while, but it's so important because it's the foundational component. And I love using metaphors, and we're talking about real estate. And if you have a property and you're not paying attention to the foundation, and I love what you said, Doug, like the I read on the slide that the pylons at the wharf were deteriorating. Like if you don't take care of the foundational component that building's standing on, you're not going to have a building, right? Like you need to know what your foundational pieces are. And so understanding the core values and what matters to people really makes a big difference. And it allows you to have a conversation on a different level. And we teach families how to talk about context before they get too in the weeds with content. So if somebody's saying something and you start to have emotions flare or you get upset, you want to go right to this place of, why does that matter to you? What's important to you about that? Like real discovery and curiosity, not a, how can you think that way? Or how, it's like what happens is when we have a difference of opinion, it goes to this place of, I don't like it. And we go to like this kind of fight or flight. And what we really need to do is slow that down and go to this place of, oh, I never thought about it that way. What has you see it that way? And kind of a yes and approach. So that there's more of an expansive way of listening and communicating. So we give people exercises and activities to do this. And we talk about things that aren't so volatile to start with so that they get more comfortable having those conversations and building their skill at having it, so that when emotions come forward, they're able to manage them better. So the biggest question you need to ask, and I'm sure that Doug must have asked this with the family, is, do we want to continue owning this? Like, it's an important question. Like, for the sake of what would we continue to own this property? What matters to us about it? And if so, what are we willing to do to make sure that it works for everybody? So it can be a win-win for everybody who's the owner. And so this question of why are we owning this brings up a lot of values. It really, it's because our grandmother wanted us to, right? Well, what did she want for us from it? Like really diving into what were the messages, the stories, the reasoning behind it. And I often recommend, if the matriarch or patriarch is still alive, that they write their letter of intent, that they capture for themselves. Like even they could walk the property, they could be at it, and they could have maybe a grandchild take video of them talking about what it means to them and what they hope that the family will benefit from it, or what they really want for the family that's bigger than that. So we also help with some easy interviewing questions, and we liked having it be multi-generational. And then after you get a sense of, wow, we really want this, then it's like, what do we want to envision here? So with a property like this incredible ranch, it was, wow, what could we possibly do and create here? What could this look like? And there were some really wonderful ideas that came out of it. There was one couple that was part of the cousins line that wanted to look at the possibility of cultivating the land and growing food on it that then could be provided to food pantries and homeless shelters and feed the people who really weren't getting fed in that area, and make it so that food could be available for free for people who needed it, because they felt like they'd gotten so much in their lives and they benefited so much. Why not use this property as a way to give back? And that spoke to them in some of their values. And then the family needed to look at, well, what would that look like, and what would the cost be, and how do we make that work? And would we create a nonprofit that's part of that would lease the property? Like they had all kinds of different things they needed to expand on. And so we teach people how to have like conversations of possibility, right? Where nobody's idea is shot down right away, and they're able to really like expand into it and see what could possibly happen as a result before they get too clear on, oh, that could never work, or, we have to take care of our own. Like you don't shut down ideas really quickly. You allow for this kind of blue sky thinking, and all possibilities are open. And you even invite people to get nutty about it. Like, oh, maybe we could have it be the next launch site for that amazing rocket that's being built by Jeff Bezos, right? Like, okay, we can put that on this whiteboard. Like, just have people have fun with all kinds of different ideas. And then you start to see what fleshes out. And then you always track back to the values around it that would speak to a mission that you want to put invest your time, energy, and resources in for the long term. And it's a great way to get the multi-generations involved too. Like they're thinking about their kids and their kids' kids, and what's the legacy that that matriarch really wanted to be passed on if they want to keep it. And then they developed really clear mission statement. Once they got clear on their values that they wanted to express from the property and what they wanted to really, what their vision was for it, they came up with their mission statement. And we chose to give you the Albert Einstein quote because, you know, you can spend the rest of your life visioning what you want and having these great ideas, but if you don't take action, you're just having a fantasy, and it's fun, but it's not going to be productive. And so the mission helps to really aim and guide the actions that you're going to take for it. So one of the things that's extremely important in this process is that you create forums for communication. And so we do a lot of governance work, right? This, how do we go about making decisions together? Once you come up with how you're going to approach this and what you want to do, how do we go about doing it, right? That could be so overwhelming. And so I'm sure most of you are familiar with this graphic that came to us in 1982 by, I can never pronounce the first name, but it's, I think, Taguri and Davis. But basically it's the idea that we wear multiple hats in our families that we're in, right? Like when we're talking to people, they're simultaneously family members, they're simultaneously owners, and they're simultaneously, if they're going to build a business on it, if there is a business owners, and they're having to manage a business, right? So there's multiple aspects that they're having to think about and communicate about at the same time. And so you really want to be thinking about who are we talking about and what are we talking about in these moments, and like, who am I talking to? And it's hugely important for relationships. And so you can even have people say, you know, as an owner, I think we really need to maximize whatever money can come in from this property so that we can really sustain it and we can all have nicer lifestyles. You know, and as a business person, I really see that, you know, nonprofits are nice, but I think that we need to really have it be a going concern in a business and look at how we can use this and maybe parcel out some of the, you know, like that kind of thing. But as family, I really want to talk about what our values mean and whether it makes more sense to do something that gives back and is philanthropic, because we already have so much and that would really express the values that our matriarch wanted us to have, right? So you can have all these different viewpoints simultaneously, but you really track to, given that family is our number one goal and our number one value and how we've expressed it, we need to make sure that we're always truing to that first in these conversations and don't get too far down a certain track because it makes good financial sense, because it might detract from the family and what we want, that's the intangible. So there's a couple of different, we use, the work that we do comes from engaged ownership from Amy Ranker-Thomas. So we've been certified in it and we use her work and we help families understand, like whether they're on the family council or the owners council, that they need to determine what are the decisions they need to make and who's going to make those decisions, right? So they're going to come up with their decision-making process. And this is a decision-making grid that we developed that's it's adopted from her work. And you can do it however you want, but we find that it's really great in a session with the family, as you know, let's say the owners, there's 9 cousins, right? And 3 of them are going to be part of the owners council, and they're going to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting around this property. And then they'll be reporting back to the owners as a whole, but that's the council that they, you know, decided is going to do that. And they, as a family, as all the owners came together in a meeting, they decided what are the decisions we need to be working on and making. And they just created a list, and anything that came up went into that list. Everything from exit strategy, if somebody doesn't want to be an owner anymore, to how are we going to decide about improvements, to how are we going to decide how much that people are going to be putting in, and is it going to be usage-based or owner-based or some combination of the two. If there is more usage, does somebody put in more into a different fund? Like they needed to decide all these things. And as advisors, we come in and we support them in the conversations, and we might tell them some best practices other families have done, but we don't necessarily recommend what they should do. But they often look for guidance, right? Like, well, what have other families done in this situation? Because they don't know, they've never done it before. And so it's helpful for them to have some things normalized. And if we see that they're missing a decision that they really do need to be thinking about, like exit strategy doesn't necessarily come up for them. And so we'll throw that out there and we'll say, you know, sometimes a cousin, one of these 9 cousins might have an issue in their life and they actually might want to be bought out and not be part of it. Maybe they live in a different country, maybe they never use it, and they could really benefit from the money. You need to have a clear exit strategy and what that would look like. It's probably one of the most key things that gets missed that's so important. And then people, you can decide when you have your different, your family that's involved, your owners that are involved, you can decide who is going to have decision-making powers, who wants to be consulted before a decision's made, who just wants to be informed about the decision, who's going to be responsible for actually putting it into practice, the execution of it, and then who gets the veto power. And we need to have veto in there, but we always recommend that it's minimally used, because otherwise it can just derail the process. And you need to, use it sparingly, but it's important to have it. So we wanted to just give you like a sense of what's possible. I know I kind of threw a lot at you, but there you have it. That's a little bit. And I wanted to also share, going back to the Roxy, Doug, you'll love this. I just heard from an elementary school friend that I've been friends with for like 40 years. And he said, my band's playing at the Roxy this Saturday. Can you come up? Because he was so excited. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the Roxy was just in my awareness this week. So I thought I'd let you know that is a fun little, bringing it back to what we're talking about today.
That's wonderful. Emily, thank you so much for that discussion. I'm going to stop sharing our screen so I can really kind of focus and look at the chat room and see if we have any questions. But as you all know, I have a lot of questions already for us. So let's see what's going on. Give me a second while I stop that share and I move over here. Great. Again, thank you to all the panelists for this great discussion. Looking forward to having a few more questions. The great thing is we've already been asked for contact information from the panelists, so I'm sure Bill will be able to send an email out with that. I'm going to get started with a few questions here that I think it's probably perfect to be built off of what Emily was just discussing. And I'm going to open this all up to the panelists, all 3 of you, because I'd like to hear from the 3 of you. Knowing the complexity of not only the real estate assets themselves, the legal side of it, and the families together, I'd like each of you to talk about any hurdles that you notice that families have in engaging your services. I think for many of our practitioners out in the audience, it would be helpful to hear from you on how you get over that specific obstacle. Why don't we start it off with Doug?
I think the fear of the unknown is probably one of the key things. These families, I think they're reluctant oftentimes to admit that they don't really understand what all of these assets are, or that they've been perhaps kept out of the loop by the family. But I think it takes a while to have them really understand, and this is part of the nurturing process, that there's great value in bringing in objective third parties. And I think that's really the foundation of how we approach it. We say, let's come in objectively and look at this in a non-threatening way. The worst thing you can do is to be tolerant, reactive, dictatorial, never get anywhere. Trust is the foundation of a successful assignment. And so I think that trust comes early in when you first meet these people. Oftentimes, you got to meet the family many times and actually be able to build that bond, build that trust, share other examples, share other beneficial stories, perhaps put them in touch with references, but to do it in a non-threatening way. Because all of these assignments, to be successful, it's a long-term journey. And it's clearly a long-term collaborative journey. But I think once we have, that's why we approach it incrementally. I mean, we aren't saying you've got to buy everything at once. No way. We have various steps that are all dependent upon the success of the prior step. And so I think, just not to take it easy, not to go too fast, and to build that foundation of trust, I think is the key to a successful assignment.
That's a great approach, Doug. And I want to encourage the panelists too, as you guys each answer these questions, that you engage in conversation amongst yourself. I'm going to ask Dawn the same question, and then so that we have a couple of questions from the audience that I'd like to get to. So Dawn, again, how do you get families to feel comfortable with this process and the services that you provide for them?
Sure. I find I agree with Doug, everything Doug said, I have experienced as well. I find with our clients, I was just kind of scanning my brain, thinking about our existing family office clients and what the obstacles were. And what I think the primary obstacle is with our clients, because the majority of our family office clients are outsourced family offices. So they're just overwhelmed by the prospect of, oh my gosh, I didn't realize basically I have a whole nother business I have to run. I have to run the business of running my businesses. And they get very overwhelmed when they realize that they have a variety of entities and assets, none of which are coordinated. And they see the lost opportunity because assets aren't being used for their best and highest use. They see the major lost tax opportunities because there's been no tax planning between entities. And they just get really overwhelmed by the amount of work. And I had one client say to me, you know, gee, I thought I was really successful until we had this meeting. And now I feel like a failure because I've had all this opportunity for 20 years and I haven't stopped and paused and taken a moment to have anybody look at it and see how I could maximize my opportunities. And I'm really frustrated with myself because of I didn't engage in income tax planning by balancing where my assets lied between these entities. So I think it's a sense of being overwhelmed. And so what we do is we, of course it's overwhelming because you are successful and you have a lot of assets. And so it is going to be overwhelming, but we have a team that can take that off of you. And I start introducing them to the team members, and then they get excited. And that sense of defeated, overwhelming, oh my gosh, what have I done, turns into excitement because they start to see the process work and they realize that the people are really all there for them. And we build teams that are incredibly collaborative. I've made a couple mistakes along the way and invited people onto the team who weren't and wanted to throw other team members under the bus. They're immediately removed. There's zero tolerance for that because clients don't need that stress. And it's not helpful and it doesn't move projects forward. So we work just in a really collaborative environment, which that environment by itself, I think, as Doug said, makes the clients feel comfortable. They realize there isn't a dictator and there isn't someone who's always calling the shots. And we see in the teams, people who are more predominant in, like, there are certain projects where the Doug Wilson group will be the predominant leaders. Then there's other projects where the CPA is the predominant leader and others where the financial advisor is, because no one has the ego that says this is my team and I'm going to do everything the way I want. It's the team reacts to the need of the client. And so different people are in leadership roles at different times. And I think that gives the client a high level of confidence as well, because there's no one there with their own agenda. Everybody's there working for the client.
Thank you, Dawn. That's really helpful. I'm going to get to a panelist question from Michelle. Michelle is asking a question that we've all actually discussed amongst ourselves when we were preparing for this panel. So she describes to us a hotel motel situation that a family owns. What she's describing as a 3.0 on a 5-point scale. Receives very low rents, great location. We have a son-in-law who has a vision of developing the adjoining property to a higher end use hotel. The current matriarch inherited the property from her mother. The daughter will inherit it at that point, and then her daughter is married to the son-in-law who's a developer. So the question actually is very interesting. Michelle is asking, where do we send these types of clients that are smaller clients, thinking that this asset is too small for any of our work? And I know we discuss this a lot, where people think that maybe some projects are too small. Who wants to take that question on? Because I think it's really interesting on the concept that something can be too small to actually.
Well, I'll touch on that for a moment, and I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts. But it's fun, and it's neat to talk about all these large projects and all the complexities and the issues. The reality is, for every one of those, there are 100 projects that we all do as a firm. The last thing you could ever do is to say, we don't want to do that, or we're too good for that. The reality of it is, we're into relationship building as a firm. We're a professional organization. That's what you do. A situation like you're talking about, you have the same fact pattern, you get all the same dynamics. The numbers may be slightly smaller, but the process doesn't really alter. And so, we have been able to successfully navigate all of these years by, being competitive from a pricing standpoint. And so, if there's a situation that's not applicable, we certainly would refer them to others. But we would never say, we don't do that. I mean, we've helped with lot splits and single family houses and all kinds of things. But again, arrogance is highly overrated in this. And it's something that to be successful in what we all do, you don't want to go down that path. So.
Great, thank you, Doug.
I would agree with Doug. We just have the does the client make my stomach hurt test. So if we see their name pop up on our phone and you're like, oh, my stomach hurts, then we don't want to work with them. But if they're fun and they're engaging, and of course everybody's going to be difficult at some point because we're dealing with really stressful issues. But as long as they're not abusive, we don't have a dollar limit. That's one of the reasons my partner and I left the international law firm, was so that we could have what we called the feel good law firm. We just want to feel good about the projects we work on and the people we work with. And so we don't take every project. And I can tell you, we released a family office client with over $1 billion in assets because the client made my stomach hurt, and it wasn't for legal reasons, it was for personality reasons. Every time I saw his name on the phone, I didn't want to pick up the phone. So we don't have a dollar amount minimum. It truly is, are we a good fit, and do we think we can help them? And something like what you described, we've done a lot of that type of work, and I can say we brought Doug Wilson Group in. The building that burned down was a really small project, and it got the attention from Michelle and their team as though it were a huge project. So I think I've from working with the Wilson Group and our firm together, that we don't really have that arbitrary dollar amount minimum. As Doug said, arrogance is overrated, and you just want to know you can add value and help them. And that's certainly a situation where all the panelists could add value and help. I love your fact pattern, actually. It made me think, oh, we can do this and we can do this.
I know. And it's funny because Michelle is saying, okay, so who do I call? Well, Michelle, you can call any of us.
Have you had a study to prove you need a hotel there? What else? What's the nearest other hotel?
We all do work together. I'm sure we're already brainstorming ideas.
Exactly.
What you can and cannot do. So Michelle, Bill will share contact information with the entire audience. So it's really something that you can reach out to anyone and any of us, and we'll all point you in the right direction as to who you need on your team. Another question from the audience, and this is an interesting one. Who takes the lead and responsibility for coordinating the family members and the team as a whole and keeping things moving to fruition? I think that's a really interesting question, and it kind of changes all the time. I'd like to hear from Emily on this one, because it is really about the family dynamics and having them weave in with the different consultants.
Yeah, and it's so important when you're doing collaboration, and we love to collaborate, because it's so good to, like you said, I think, Don, you know your lane, like what you have is your expertise and what you're good at, and then making sure that clients have the best possible resources for the other aspects. And it really typically depends on who the client has the most trusted relationship with. So we will often work with like a head of a family office that's kind of coordinating all the tactical things. And we will have our client advisor on the team be the one to do the coordinating with the family office and to make sure that we're doing the, we're staying in contact with the other team members, the other advisors, but then we're also coordinating the family meetings. So we will often take the lead with like the logistics around the family meetings, making sure the right people are there at the right time and that everybody who needs to be there can be. And then we run like the relationships with the client family members, especially if they have a banking relationship with US Bank and as part of our collaboration, because we do a lot of the day-to-day needs that they might have with that, mortgages and credit and banking. And then with our CFO services, we have like the aggregate reporting of all these different assets that they have and from the different advisors as well. And then we make sure that we're coordinating with the family office team in terms of what they need when, how, and then we, when they give us the information that we need, we can do the reporting in a way that supports them with what they need. And then the family feels really taken care of by the whole. So, and we're national, so we have offices all over the country. And so it just depends on like where the family's centrally located, because they might have, we work with families in different countries, like family members are in different countries. So they can access, they'll have a client advisor from one of our regions, and then they'll coordinate all of these different actions. So, and then my team is national, and we work with the different client advisors in those offices. And so we coordinate with them what they need for their family meetings and the individual work that they might need with different conflict resolution or something like that.
Great, thank you. We're getting close to our closing up time here at 9 o'clock, but I wanted to ask, because I think it's important to talk about what you really enjoy about this work as individuals and as firms. We all have reasons that we do the work that we do, and all of you being leaders in your respective sectors and have really developed your careers and put a lot into this. Tell me about what really motivates you to do this type of work. And let's go ahead and start with Dawn on this one.
Sure. I love bringing order to chaos. I'm a compulsive organizer. I love lists. I love being able to check things off my list. So I just love the challenge of seeing all these amazing people. The thing I enjoy the most about our practice is we work with the most interesting people that, as someone with a high school education that built over a $200 million real estate empire, and he's the most intelligent, dynamic man that has in many ways turned into a mentor for me. So it's the relationships with the just really interesting people who take a lot of risk. I'm not a risk taker, so I will always be serving the wealthy. I will not be served by others because I don't take risk. And I see the ultra wealthy, they're real risk takers, but calculated risk. So I love just seeing a side of life that I would never otherwise get to see, and communicate with people who are just exceptionally bright and dynamic. And I really love building the team. And so for our outsourced family office clients, we typically manage the team. We're the chief cat herders. And it's not a glamorous position. It's not a power position. It's just a ton of follow-up and a ton of communication to make sure all the projects stay on track. And so I just love that interactive aspect and getting to work with the best and brightest professionals and clients. It's really a rewarding practice.
Thanks, Dawn. Doug, tell me about what has motivated you over the years for all the services Douglas Wilson Companies provides.
Well, thank you for that question. I'm often asked, what am I most proud of? The buildings I've built, and I am very proud of the legacy and number of the projects we built downtown and the like. But, the fact is, over these many decades, the thing that I have found of equal rewarding, and perhaps more so, is be able to work in a collaborative manner to get positive results in complex situations. And I like to do that by nurturing others within my company. It's not me, it's Michelle and many others. And that to me is a powerful thing. It's really a wonderful opportunity to be able to make a difference, working with others. by rolling up our sleeves and addressing challenges head on and looking back and saying, wasn't that a wonderful result? And at the end, to actually have a client say, great job, thank you for that. That's rewarding.
Great, thank you. And Emily, I'm going to close it out with you because, you know, it's very interesting to have the background that you do have with social work, the degrees that you have focused around psychology and these kinds of dynamics, and for you to choose this avenue of that. It's not something that you see very often. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I didn't even know this existed. And it chose me. And, you know, for me, when I found out that there is like this huge unnecessary burden and suffering in the world related to wealth, I was stunned. I had no idea. And it's a very painful thing and it's very real. And the young people that are growing up in families of significant wealth, they're really at risk. And when I found that out, I just thought, oh my gosh, they're totally underserved. And talk about making a difference. You know, when you're able to give somebody a voice and a purpose and a mission and a vision that allows them to really harness this incredible good fortune that they have, to then be able to be self-expressed with their values and their purpose and where they can make a difference. There's such a ripple effect that can happen with families of this nature. And I'm just blown away by what I've seen happen as a result of facilitating conversations that allow for people to be heard and for people to be able to step into that and to really minimize and mitigate a lot of the negative aspects of what our society does to people who grow up in wealth, so that they can really have fulfilling lives and then make a difference. And then all the people that are their employees and work with them, their lives are expanded too, and what they are able to do in the world and their philanthropy, it's amazing. So yeah, I couldn't believe when I found out that people are people no matter what. You know, it's like you have your dysfunction and wealth just amplifies it, right? It's just whatever, the more money, it's like wax on wood. It just makes whatever is beautiful shine and whatever is like not so beautiful shine, come forth too. And I like what Dawn said about, God, when people get involved, it's like they go around in circles. And I like to think of it as like a slinky where we're always evolving and going up, and we hit up against certain things along the way, and we get to see, oh wow, who am I now with that old thing? And so that's what I like to do, is help people with that. And it's really thrilling to get to do it and to be able to collaborate with so many people that are so committed to the success of a family.
Well, thank you. I will say, you know, it's very clear the three of you are incredibly passionate about your work. You all have incredible resumes and experience. And I think this has been really helpful because you've touched upon all these different pieces of this puzzle as you work together collaboratively to really help these families move their assets, make them highest and best use, and give them a sense of calm that they understand how the future is going to unfold for them. It's a great, great structure that you guys have developed together. And I want to thank you for taking the time. I know preparing for this presentation took us some time, but I think it's been very thoughtful and meaningful for our audience. Thank you again. I'm going to hand it over to Bill Super so he can close the event.
Well, thank you very much, Doug, Dawn, Michelle, Emily. What a fantastic presentation as you pulled together the, you know, really the makeup of the team here. Obviously, there would also be, you know, the CPA and the financial advisor and what have you. But I think one message that came through loud and clear was team. And really appreciate how you work together to build the presentation and then work together to kind of go the back and forth to bring it all to light. As we know, you know, Emily, this is what you do every day. Every family is different. So there's no cookie cutter approach to having to deal with that. You know, Dawn, you know, I certainly commend you in your just broader view of dealing with families. You're certainly a noted estate trust administration and litigation expert in California, but this is just such a fascinating area. And I think that's the key behind that. For me, it's a fascinating area of, really making a difference with the family. Doug and Michelle, obviously for the real estate families, which is what this is kind of fitting under, this is the key. Sometimes a family may know everything about real estate, but often they don't. And they need that, kind of step-by-step approach that you all bring. And really looking forward to hearing from you all in the future. And I know there's many more stories that we can cover, and we'll do that in the future. So thanks so much. Reminder to everybody, our September 7th meeting with John Kramer and the Kramer family. He's going to be going over how a single family office works. Each is different from the others, but he'll certainly have some insights to share, not only from his generation, but the next succeeding generation, as well as a non-family member, managing director of the whole family's real estate holdings. So with that, we will see you all on September 7th, and thank you all so much for attending. All the best.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank
Have a
you,
great
Bill.
day, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
Bill.
you.
Thank you, everyone.